All right, let's get right into it. The year is 1918. The Great War is finally over. You'd think that's a reason to celebrate, right? Well, while the world was breathing a sigh of relief, the economic foundations of that world were starting to crumble, setting the stage for a totally new kind of disaster.
And that's really the big question we're tackling here. See, the war didn't just end, it completely rewired the entire global economy. And while people were celebrating in the streets, the systems holding everything together were stretched to their absolute breaking point. So the peace that followed, it wasn't a time for recovery. It was a powder keg just waiting for a spark.
The best way to really wrap your head around this whole collapse is to think of it like a line of dominoes. Just one little push, one point of pressure, and it set off this chain reaction that toppled entire nations, economies, and yeah, eventually the peace itself. So what was that first push? Well, it all starts with the war's economic ripple effect. This conflict didn't just leave scars on the battlefield. It left these deep, destabilizing wounds all over the global financial system. So let's look at the situation on the ground. First off, you've got nations buried under literal mountains of debt they took on to pay for the war. Then, the giant factories that had been pumping out weapons and uniforms, they were struggling to switch back to making things people actually wanted to buy, which meant massive unemployment. All of this created a ton of anger and frustration, and it was all happening in this newly interconnected world, where one country's crisis could become everybody's problem, like overnight. This was the first domino, just sitting there, wobbly and waiting to be tipped. And that brings us to the first major domino to fall. This tangled, completely unsustainable cycle of international debt. This wasn't just a simple loan, okay? This was a complex web that had trapped, well, pretty much everyone. To pay for all the tanks and the shells and the soldiers, European countries, on both sides, by the way, had borrowed staggering amounts of money. And who did they borrow from? Mostly the United States. After the war, those bills started coming due, and the debts became this crushing weight on their already shattered economies. Okay, now this is where it gets just plain absurd. Look at this cycle. Step 1, Germany gets slapped with massive reparation payments that they have to pay to the winners in Europe. Step 2, those European countries immediately turn around and use that exact same money to pay back their own war debts to the United States. And then, and this is the craziest part, Step 3, US banks loaned money right back to Germany. So why on earth would they do that? Well, it was to make sure Germany could keep paying Europe, so Europe could keep paying them. It was a complete financial house of cards, built on this ridiculous circular flow of money that just could not last. So that immense pressure from this fragile debt cycle, it was about to cause the next, absolutely terrifying domino to fall. Because when governments can't pay their bills, sometimes they do something truly disastrous. They just start printing more money. And this leads to a phenomenon called hyperinflation. And listen, this isn't just your grocery bill going up a little bit. We are talking about the value of money itself being completely destroyed. It spirals so fast that it becomes, well, basically worthless. And nowhere was this more catastrophic than in Germany. Let's make this real. In 1922, a simple loaf of bread in Germany would have cost you about 250 marks. A little pricey, sure, but, manageable. Now, fast forward just a few months to early 1923. That same loaf of bread, it now costs 3,500 marks. You can already see things are getting out of hand. And by the end of that same year, are you ready for this? That same loaf of bread cost 200 times billion marks. People were literally using wheelbarrows, full of cash just to go grocery shopping. The money was worth less than the paper it was printed on. So what's the real takeaway here? Hyperinflation didn't just make things expensive. It completely annihilated the financial security of an entire class of people. Their life savings, their retirement funds, every single thing they had worked for their entire lives was just gone, overnight. This didn't just cause poverty, it shattered their faith in the democratic government that let it happen. And you can probably guess what domino falls next. When money is worthless and savings are gone, you get mass unemployment, which in turn fuels deep social unrest. This chart really just lays it all out, doesn't it? I mean, look at the difference between the average unemployment before the war and the peak after the war. It's a staggering jump. Those wartime industries shut down, and millions of people, including soldiers who had just come home from the horrors of the trenches, were suddenly left with no work and no hope. And this quote right here, it gets to the absolute heart of the political consequences. When people are desperate, when they feel like the system has totally failed them, they start looking for alternatives. Economic pain fueled social unrest, and people began turning to more extreme political movements that promised simple, powerful answers to their very complex problems. All of this, the debt, the financial collapse, the unemployment, it all created the perfect storm for the final and most destructive domino to fall. It created an appetite for extreme solutions. So let's just trace that chain reaction one more time. The crushing more debts led to governments just printing money, which caused hyperinflation. That hyperinflation combined with industries shutting down led to mass unemployment. All that unemployment fueled massive social unrest, which all came to a head in a catastrophic loss of faith in democratic governments to solve any of it. And that is the ultimate takeaway from this entire period. The constant economic chaos after World War I didn't just create poverty. It completely undermined political stability itself. It made extremist leaders who promised to bring back national pride and fix the economy by any means necessary seem not just appealing, but essential to millions of desperate people. And it leaves us with this huge and frankly timeless question. The story of the post-war economy isn't just history. It's a stark warning about that fragile link between how a country is doing financially and how stable it is politically. It really forces us to ask, how much pressure can a society take before it finally snaps?